hearing your voice come out there, I mean, your voice is so distinctive. I was wondering, like, when did that voice first appear? Like, were you 4 years old, 6 years old,
actually,
10?
It's a very good question. When I was 16 years old, my voice still had not changed. Mine was the last voice in high school to change. I was doing a children's play at the time, and my voice was up here kind of like this, and it was really high. And I was actually playing, at 16 years old, I was playing a 10-year-old boy in a children's play. And then we were about 2 weeks into the run of this children's play, and all of a sudden it went off here like this and down here like that for Act 2. And I couldn't control it. It was cracking all over the... But you know what happened? People, I do get a lot of people remarking on my voice, and oddly enough, it just sounds like my voice to me, so I don't really know. But I did train classically as a singer, and part of the spill-off of that is that you learn how to speak as well. So it's the same instrument, whether you're sustaining tone for a longer period of time or whether you're just speaking. But on the other end of that is that I grew up in the late 60s. That was my early teens. I was born in 1954, so you do the math.
59.
But the late 60s, the late 60s were that wonderful period of rock and roll DJs, where all of a sudden, and they controlled rock and roll. And the voices that you heard, this is WDRC with every album ever recorded, And so you started to learn these wonderful voices, and it was just, for me, I think I just learned how to mimic voices, and I think that's probably where I developed my style.
You talk about the cadence of your voice. I think that's as important as the timbre and the sound of your voice. You do have a certain cadence about your delivery, and it makes it more
I have
attractive.
a lot of fun with it. I'll either speak very, very fast or very slow, and I try to mix up as I do with Billy Flynn. If he's sure of himself, he's speaking fast. If he's deliberate, he's speaking very slow. And I like that because it keeps an audience as an audience, it keeps you on your toes. You got to listen. You go, ooh, he's talking fast. You listen. No, he's talking slow. He must mean what he says.
He's a great character.
I would say Billy Flynn is one of the most interesting characters I've played. He's not quite Hamlet, but he's but it's a very complicated character because in addition to having this, the swash, that sense of that 30s elegance that we somehow have lost, that's an important part of the character. But as I've seen this character played time and time again, it gets a little bit monochromatic in a way, because most people just play him as slick. And I think you miss the role if you do that. I think Billy Flynn has a wonderful paternal side to him. You don't hear much about his other life outside of being a lawyer or this case. So I had to kind of invent it for myself. But I think Billy Flynn actually has a very paternal quality that comes out in one little moment in the show. And when Bianca there is Roxy, and by the way, wasn't she phenomenal? Blow away. Truly one of the best Roxys that has ever done that role. But I think that when she turns to me and says, Billy, I'm scared. That moment of realization that she's scared, and despite what just went on stage, that fit of argument that we just had, and the whole you're fired and I'm fired, whatever, that whole thing dissolves in one moment where she says, Billy, I'm scared. Yeah. And it's my responsibility at that point to protect her. And I will protect her all the way through the courtroom scene and everything that we do until the end of the show, when she is back to who she really is. And it's adios. But I think that's a side of Billy that has to be there. And if it isn't there, it's not an interesting character to me, because it's just kind of
too sharp.
He's basically a one-note character all the way through, and I think that's what makes him fun for me to play as well.
Well, I certainly want to have folks ask you some questions, and as we get somebody up to the microphone, I'd like to ask you, how many Roxys have you had? I mean, so to speak.
Lobbing the softballs at me here, are you? Oh, goodness. I think probably maybe 24. I've done the role over 1,000 times. I started in...
That's pretty amazing.
I started in 2005, shortly after my run on Dancing with the Stars. And then...
How about that, huh? Dancing with the Stars? Should have won the first time.
Well, it was,
Controversy.
listen, that was God's little practical joke, let me tell you. Put the 50-year-old guy in a bunch of spandex. Yeah, that's funny. All of America wanted to watch that. Spandex. It's memory yarn with a lot of bad memories.
They say it's like cats fighting in a bag.
That's exactly what it was, yeah. But I started this role in 2005, shortly after that, and I've never looked back. I've had the best time in this role, and God bless the Weislers who were able to resurrect the show back in '95 and give it the look that it has right now, because this is now the new, this is the look of Chicago. For those of you who remember that this was a show that was out in the 70s, and it survived on Broadway for about 900 performances, 2 years. But there were sets, there were costume changes, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek vaudevillian, and it didn't really have a sense of strong perspective, and that's what this show has. You know exactly what it is. It's minimalist theater, and your job as the audience is to use your imagination to understand what's going on, which makes it so much more fun, because it really is, this is, and I want to say, an adult musical, not by any means of what's going on or that it's naughty. It's politely naughty, but it makes adults think, which is what I love about when you come to the theater. You've got to actually, you're not seeing everything. It's not, Miss Saigon, where you have to have a helicopter dropping in the middle of the stage to prove that it's really Vietnam. Or it's like, what I like about it is that it's told in story style with nothing. So it's really left to your imaginations.
You get the bandbox right in the middle, sort of like the heart, the pulse,
yep,
right there, and
yep,
imagination
yep,
works the rest of it. Well, how about our first question up there?
Hello.
I have a Seinfeld question.
Oh.
When you were in that series, did you realize what kind of an iconic influence that was going to have on pop culture
That's a
for
great
generations?
Question. Yes, it is. And to the point where I would always tell anybody, thank you for your question, I would always tell anybody that was there in the J. Peterman office, anybody who was like, they would hire extras to play assistants and people that would sit in boardrooms, and I would say to each one of them, what I want you to do is hold on to this script. I want you to write notes in it about what you wore, who was there, what they were wearing, all the other stuff that went on, because you are going to be watching this show with your grandchildren. And I can't promise you that about any other show that you'll ever do, but this one I can't. I said, it's going to run forever. And it's not that I knew it. It was already sold into syndication, so it was like, I wasn't waving my wand over and blessing the fleet as they were. It was, but it was just, you just had a sense that this was, and when we sat down at the table reads, you had that sense that this was something really special.
That character, how many times did the character appear in the series? And still, that character is an iconic character.
Well, I did the last 4 seasons of the show, and I did about half the episodes each year. So it was, depending upon how many they did. I never really sat and counted it. To be true to you, I never watched the show.
Whoa.
I don't watch anything I do, and I'll tell you why. I like to remember it as theater. For that one wonderful moment when it all kind of worked and it was fun, and it's like, but if I go back and I watch it afterwards, it becomes an editor's medium, and all I do is get mad at the way that they edit it. Now, you don't have to deal with it because you're dealing in live television, but imagine if all the work that you did, all of a sudden, you're doing your show. Your show is like an hour, I think, in the morning or something like that. But imagine if all of a sudden you feel like they cut it back to like 10 minutes. You'd be going, where's all that stuff that I did? And it's so frustrating in television and in film. And that's why I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't watch anything I did. I still have not seen myself dance on Dancing with the Stars. I just live a much happier life that way of just doing it. No, I honestly do. I don't need to be, artsy-fartsy about this. I just think I am a happier person by remembering that wonderful moment that it happened. Because that's ultimately what theater is. Tonight's performance is gone. The energy still is here in the room, but the performance is gone. And I'll have to remember that. And that's what I love about theater, and that's what I love about doing it and forgetting about it.
Well, these folks have a great memory of tonight, because it was a terrific show tonight, wasn't it? It was great. I liked your little dance, too. Little minimalist there, working your way across the stage.
And it burned. Boy, I burned a lot of calories. You saw that little thing?
You were tearing it up. Who has the next question here?
All right, it's actually not a question. I just wanted to say how fabulous you were tonight.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you.
just your voice is just, you know, I hear it a lot, and I did watch you on Seinfeld, and I hear it a lot, and it's very calming to me. You just have a very calming voice, and I just want to say thank you for that.
That's very sweet of you to say. I have a 7-year-old son who says, Daddy, why can't you just talk normally? Daddy, stop talking like that. Will you just talk normal?
There is authority to your voice in a way, but there's a softness and a generosity to it.
Well, thank you. I hope so. But it's unfortunately he catches the wrong end of it sometimes. Trust me.
That's what 7-year-old boys get sometimes. Next question.
Yes, I'd like to say that when I got home yesterday, my wife said, "Guess who called me?" So I went through a litany of people that might have called her, and she said, no, 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 no. So I said, okay, who called? She said, John O'Hurley called me. So John, please stop.
Oh, did they do did the theater do a?
Please stop
Well,
calling.
that's just wrong, isn't it? Did I say things like, I don't like the way you've done the living room?
No, I just want to tell you, please stop calling my wife.
Stop
okay?
calling-
You know, you're interfering in our marriage, okay?
But you're a generous and giving man that you allow your wife to have those open conversations with total strangers.
What I really wanted to ask you the question, it goes back to Seinfeld. Now, Jay Peterman, I loved him.
He was a raving lunatic, wasn't he?
And I wanted to know if you ever met the man, you know, sort of, you know, like the...
Well, the PS to the story on Jay Peterman was that I met the real John Peterman shortly after I began this whole parody of him. Now, to backstep even further, the real Jay Peterman had no idea that he was on Seinfeld being parodied. He walked into the office on Friday morning, and everybody said, "You were on Seinfeld last night." He goes, "No, I was in a plane." They said, "No, you're on the show." And she now works for the Jay Peterman company. And he went, so obviously this begat lawyers, begat lawyers, begat lawyers, begat NBC's lawyers, begat. So anyway, all of this talk went back and forth because what Seinfeld would do was they would grab something like this, never ask permission, and they just found it much easier to apologize afterwards. And that's in fact what they did. And they said, "We want to continue the character on the show. It'll be great press for the company." And the company literally went from 15 million in annual sales to 125 million over the 4 years that I was parodying the character of Peterman. So they did quite well. However, shortly after Seinfeld ended, with many of the other IPO problems in the late 90s, they went into Chapter 11. So they lost everything, and John Peterman was able to get the intellectual property back for the company, and he called me a year later, in 1999, and he said, "What do you say we put the company back together, you and I, from your parallel strengths?" And since 1999, I have owned the Jay Peterman company with the real Jay Peterman. So I'm very happy when people still remember the character, because to me it means the brand is still alive. And if you go home tonight and punch up jpeterman.com, you'll see the catalog there. And if you have never seen the catalog before, it is still the same way that these are long Hemingway adventure stories about an Oxford button-down. And as Tom Hanks once said to me, he goes, "This is the only catalog that I read cover to cover. I read it to my wife, Rita, in bed, and I use your voice."
That would be fun to hear, wouldn't it?
Yep. Oh, yeah. He does actually, Hanks does a very good impersonation of me. It's very funny.
That's excellent.
That's very funny.
You know, somebody said something about interior decorating or something. That's one of your favorite hobbies, isn't it?
I would be the only, if I had another career, I'd be the only straight interior designer in LA. I love architecture and interior design. I just do. I mean, you put me with a copy of Architectural Digest, and I'm happy for an hour.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Question.
First, I'd like to say what a wonderful job you did tonight.
Thank you.
It was very nice. And as much fun as this show is, Chicago, I love it. Listen to the soundtrack all day today. In that moment that you were talking with Roxy that you mentioned earlier, I specifically wanted to ask you, as a dad, if that impacted how you were able to communicate with her in that scene. It was very touching.
You know, it is. It really is. That's it, because I learned a sense of, as you become a father, and I became a father late in life, you become sensitive to a side of yourself that you really didn't know was there. It is impossible to explain to someone who does not have a child that love that you feel and that sense of protection that you feel for that child. And it is just a magical, magical thing. And it's like these things, you know, all of these things add up in the life and the circumstances of an actor. And they come out on stage, and they come out in different points. And I would say it's because of all of the colors that having a child has added to my life. I'm a much richer actor for having my son. And it's an enormous experience for me. I just love it. Even though I'll be the only dad at a PTA meeting with a colostomy bag, probably. I'm sorry. It's got to be an old guy coming in and say, hello.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Next question.
First of all, I'd like to say wonderful performance.
Thank you very much.
And secondly, I'd like to ask, how old were you when you decided to dye your hair that color?
Ah, interesting. that blonde look that I have. You know, it's funny. I remember doing, when I first got to New York, I did a play called Mass Appeal, which is a great two-man play, and it was about a young seminarian and an old pastor that were butting heads all the way through the show. It was a wonderful, wonderful tour de force role for a young actor. And I got there, and that's one of the roles that I was going to write my career with. And I got to do the play, and all of a sudden my hair started like sprouting little white things and like that. And I'm playing a 19-year-old seminarian, so I had to go back and with polish, just kind of go and take that, just like thin these out just a little bit so that I had the full. I didn't, but more and more it started to creep in, and when I was starting to do daytime television in New York in the late '80s, then I just let it go. I didn't bother with it. I just never bothered. I just felt, I'm an urbane type of character, so it kind of fit the brand, I guess.
Urbane, I like that
Urbane.
word. You were on, what was the name of it? Santa Barbara.
Listen, I was on all the soaps.
Santa Barbara. Robin
1980s.
Wright was on that, right? Sean
exactly.
Penn's ex-wife or wife, yeah. I used to come home and watch that show all the time from school.
I know that. As I said, I don't like the way you've done your living room. I started off in 1983 on The Edge of Night. Killed that show. ABC then sent me over to Loving, which was a brand new show on ABC back in 1984, where I played the first twin brothers on daytime television. It's a little trivia. Before
you play both
before
characters.
David Canary did it on, I was doing it on Loving, actually. ABC was cutting their eye teeth over with me on that. And I'll tell you a very quick story, very, very quick story. This is very funny. I had to have a body double. When you're playing twin brothers, you have to have somebody that looks like you from the back. So they found this guy who is a bouncer down at the Limelight Disco down on 19th Street down near the Village. And he was an extra, so they brought him in, and all he would do is just stand there. And they would shoot over his shoulder at me talking to myself, theoretically, or having fistfights with myself, or doing anything that they could possibly do on daytime with myself. Unfortunately, this guy, when he talked, was like, these, thems, and those. He was right out of the Bronx. I mean, just total Bronx accent. And he would say my lines, and I'd be sitting there looking at him, listening to my lines, kind of like this, everything was kind of like, I said finally to the producers, I said, would you just tell him just to be quiet? He doesn't have to, he's like throwing me way off here. I said, it's not even the same tempo that I would say the line. So I said, I'll just figure it out, and I'll make the gap in my head and figure it out. So that's fine. He was there, and this went on for about over a year he was doing. So he was employed for a year as my body double. And every time we would finish, he'd say, I don't think they need me anymore. I'm going to go back down to my dressing room because I'm finishing up my play. I said, you wrote a play, Mr. D. Stems and Does? He said, yeah, I wrote a play about my life and all my experiences. And I said, really? Really? It was Chaz Palminteri. The show was Bronx Tale.
Holy crow. How about that?
Chaz was my body double. And it was Bronx Tale that he wrote while he was playing my body double.
De Niro starred in that with him,
He
I
did,
think.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah.
That is an unbelievable story.
True story. I'm sorry, somebody is like that.
If you were a girl and you were in the show, what role would be your dream role to have?
Well, it's not Mama. Mama O.
I thought you were going there first. I just knew it.
Mama O. Would I play Roxy or Velma? Interesting, because no, I'm a monologue person. And I think I'd have to go with Roxy. Roxy, because of that wonderful chance she has for the monologue, and I love to just craft.
They could hear the wheels
like
turning in the back row on that one. You were working that one out. Next question.
What challenges did you face to get you to where you are today, and what advice do you have to aspiring performers?
The biggest challenge I ever had in my life is something that I speak to students a lot about, and not just about theater, about everything, because I do a lot of motivational speaking now for corporations and to universities, to kids and high schools and things. And one of the things I say, and it was probably the most important lesson I taught myself, was that what you imagine has value. I'll say it again, what you imagine has value. And it sounds like a very simple thing to do, but so often in life, we all have things that we imagine ourselves doing. And so often, those ideas get left at the 5-yard line, and they never get across the goal. And so the most difficult thing for me was that I imagined myself as an actor at the age of 3. At 10 years old, I would steal the black and white television set. It would go underneath the covers up in my room. And I would watch at 11:30 at night Johnny Carson, because I wanted to watch actors and I wanted to hear their stories. And I remember at the age of 10, during a commercial break, getting out of my bed with a sense of disgust, walking around the room, my hands on the hips going, what am I going to do when I get on that show? I have no stories. And I didn't know what I was going to tell him. The answer to that is when the first time I was on The Tonight Show was Johnny Carson had gone. It was Jay Leno. And during the commercial break, Jay leaned over to me and he looks at me because I'm holding on to the edges of the seat. They put 2 rails on the seat there. And he says, you okay? I said, no, I'm fine. I'm just saying hi to a 10-year-old kid.
Great
But
story.
what you imagine, so the biggest obstacle, let me answer this again and just say it conclusively, is that what you imagine has value. If everybody thought that and followed that rule, we'd be an infinitely more successful society, because too many great ideas get left at the 5-yard line. They don't get across the goal. The greatest tragedy in life is that people think that everybody else has a better idea than they do, and they don't. So that was the biggest thing for me to overcome, was imagining that this dream of being an actor and what I imagined and how I defined myself was actually had value, and I had to follow it. And that was the toughest thing for me to do.
Is that where the children's books ideas come from you?
Well, the children's book is new.
It's in
that
part
is
of
my
your imagination, you don't want to let go?
Yes, literally. When I've written, my 3rd book is out. Actually, I'm doing a book signing on, if anybody's around at Barnes & Noble at Westlake there at the mall there.
Crocker Park.
Crocker Park. I'll be there on Saturday with the kids reading to them my new book, which sold out on Amazon on first day, and it's done really well. But it's a parallel to the dog show that I do on NBC and not Fox, that I do on Thanksgiving
My favorite
Day.
Thanksgiving show?
It is indeed. But it's called The Perfect Dog, and I wrote it for my 7-year-old son, who I wrote him when he asked me, Daddy, is there a dog that is perfect? And so I wrote this as a response to him, and it's a Dr. Seuss-style poem about what a perfect dog would be, and it ends with what I think is a very telling phrase, that the dog that is perfect is the one next to you. And so that's where those books come from, yes. Yes?
I was fortunate enough to do a couple of movies here. Produced a couple of movies here in Cleveland myself, and I never did theater. And you were talking about the liveliness and energy about theater that's totally different than, TV or movies. And you just expounded on that before, and you just encouraged me to continue to do something like that. Can we, stop short, but But the energy about it, if you can talk a little bit more about the energy about the theater. And
About the theater, yes. Here's what I love about the theater, is that there are no retakes. At 6 minutes after 8, which is the rule, by the way, which means if you get here at 3 minutes after 8, you still have 3 minutes. At 6 minutes after 8, that conductor's baton drops, and this big stone ball starts moving down the hill, and it can't stop. Now, television, we would take 4 or 5 takes of every individual scene, then would turn the cameras around, you go over the shoulder shots, you do 5 or 6 versions of every scene on television. It's an editor's medium. I'm in the middle of finishing a film right now where I am actually bald, by the way. That's a scary thought. And we'll spend till 5 in the morning shooting, getting all of these variations of different 2 shots, 3 shots. We're going to do, all right, we're going to do side profile. We're going to look at you this way, okay? Now we just have to do coverage of the book that you're turning the page and over. It is an exhausting artistic endeavor. There's nothing like theater because you have to take, at 6 minutes after 8, you take a character for a journey. And he has a beginning, he has a middle, and he has an end. And you've got to figure out what that is over the 2.5 hours. And that's what is so compelling. But what I love about theater is not only the sound of the laughter, but what really engages me to this wonderful profession is the silence of an audience. Like right now. The fact that whatever I'm saying was interesting enough for you to listen and not cough or do anything else, but to actually engage yourself to me is so much more compelling than rows and rows and rows of laughter. And for an actor, I think it's the greatest challenge because as I always say when I'm talking to students, an actor has to earn the right to be silent on stage. If you don't, you'll hear it. You'll hear the coughs, you'll hear everything, and that's like the Nielsen ratings. But if you earn the right to be silent, it's such an incredibly compelling thing, and that's what I love about theater. It doesn't happen anywhere else. You can't do it. You can't do it in film. You can't do it. It's dead space that they have to fill with something, a commercial. I don't know, but in theater you can do it.
Laugh tracks.
Yes, yes.
thanks, John.
You bet. You bet. Very good question.
Hi. Just wanted to say that I enjoyed you on TV, enjoyed seeing you on stage, but also enjoyed your book, It's Okay to Miss the Bet on the First Jump.
Oh, that was the first book I wrote. Yes, thank you.
Which was
Thank
a while back, right? But I think it's one of those that's a little less known. But that was very enjoyable.
Well, it was number 1 in the New York Times, so it did fine.
And when I didn't read it, I listened to it, and
Oh,
it was
you did?
the
Oh,
audiobook
thank you. I had a lot of fun.
actually
Yeah.
read.
You know, and when I write, this is a very strange thing. When I write, I'm very methodical about and I take a lot of time off to write. I wrote that when I was doing Chicago on Broadway the first time. But I write to read. I'm not a writer who writes to just put it on the page. I speak every line that I write before it goes into send. So the entire book is a monologue for me. And that's why I enjoyed doing the Kindle, the actual reading, not the book on tape version of it as well. I enjoyed that so much because I was able to actually, it was just a running monologue to me. And I listen, and I write into my own cadence. I write into my own sense of the timbre of what I know I'm going to be doing when I read it, and the little ups and downs, and the musicality of it. And every sentence has to have kind of a flow to it. I did follow that book up with, if you're interested in reading the follow-up to It's Okay to Miss the Bet on the First Jump. I love long titles. It's called It's Okay to Miss the Bet on the First Jump and the Other Life Lessons I've Learned from My Dogs. And it's basically the premise of it is that dogs teach us everything that we need to know in life. And so it is kind of a funny, autobiographical, serious self-help type of style of book, and it's a lot of fun, and I really had a good time with it. And I did follow it up with a book called Before Your Dog Can Eat Your Homework, First You Have to Do It.
I love that title. That's so good.
Which was, and it was actually, that was a book that was written, not by me, but at the time, sadly he's passed away, my 20-year-old Maltese. And it was written to my now 7-year-old son. So I wrote it, after he first came back. We came in from the hospital, and the dog, I found little slips of paper under the foot of the big blue elephant that sat next to the feeding chair. And on those little slips of paper were little lessons on manhood that my dog had written through his perspective of, because he totally distrusted I'd ever be able to teach my son anything on the subject of manhood, so he wanted first shot at it. So it was a very funny and very heartwarming book, and sadly that it's, the legacy came true. Sadly, he did not live to have much of an influence on him, but it was a fun book to write.
There's that imagination going. And of course, he can help you find the book Saturday at Crocker Park, right? Might even sign it for you.
They'll have some there.
That's great.
And thank you, David, on behalf of Playhouse Square, and thank you,
Yeah,
John.
David, thank you so much for this. I know
Thank you.
There's a lot of things you could have been doing on a night 6 below zero, so.
Well, I didn't make a list. I was happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my question is actually from my 11-year-old that's at home. She wanted to know, as far as theater goes, what was your funniest mistake that you have ever made that you can remember from all these years?
There are so many of them. I forgot the first time I sang on stage. Nobody had a more developed sense of stage fright than I did, even though I knew I was going to be an actor and had to be an actor. The first time I sang on stage was to a song called I'll Never Fall in Love Again, which you obviously know is a very popular tune. I walked on stage, and the lead-in was there, and I went blank on every blessed lyric. And I just stood there with the microphone going da 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 da. That was followed up that same summer by walking on stage with a Lexon cube to sit as I am right now to sing a beautiful Sinatra ballad called "You Will Be My Music," which is one of my favorite Sinatra tunes. And Mr. Swift here came up to the side of this circular mirrored stage, and I caught the top of my left foot, right there, at the top of the steps. And I took the Lexon cube, the microphone, and me, and did a face plant right on the middle of the stage. I had a small cut out of my nose, and I was bleeding, and I didn't realize it, because I put the Lexon cube, I left it right there on the floor. I grabbed the microphone, and face down on the stage, I began to sing, "You Will Be My Music."
That was a horror show. Terrific.
Those are a couple. I could probably do an entire evening on my misspent youth in the theater, but many.
Well, it's sure great for you to spend the evening with us. And I just want to tell the folks out there that John will appear on New Day Cleveland tomorrow on Fox 8 at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we talked a little bit about it. We're going to do a little cooking together even, I think.
Yeah,
huh?
it's part of a community service deal I made. So it's,
That's right.
I got to burn these hours off quick. So
we'll let you folks get out of here. And I want to thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, sir.
a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you.